Hello, everyone, and welcome back to European Glimpse. I'm your host, Alice, and I'm excited to bring you an inspiring conversation this week with Daniel Kovac, the co-founder of the grassroots media platform Forum Europeum. What makes Daniel and his team so remarkable is their pan-European ambition and their age. Daniel himself is just 19. He started creating political content back in 2022 at only 16 by posting what he called European propaganda on TikTok. These were idealistic symbols of European identity that sparked lively discussions about what it truly means to be European. What began as a Hungarian project has since grown into a vibrant pan-European operation, with Daniel and the team conducting insightful interviews with politicians, cultural figures, and activists on a wide range of European topics. This year, their dedication was recognized with the Charlemagne Youth Prize from the European Parliament. Our discussion covered so much, from the perspectives of young people on the European Union to addressing common stereotypes about Central European countries. And I have to admit, Daniel's casual references to the Italian philosopher Antonio Gramsci were far beyond anything I was thinking about at 19. The conversation really underscored for me that there's an appetite among young Europeans to understand their heritage and shape European identity in the 21st century. I genuinely hope that you will enjoy this episode. And now, let's get into the conversation. Welcome to the podcast. I'm very glad that you took your time to speak with me about your project, which we're going to dive right into. As I said in the intro, you are a founder of a new European platform for media, and a lot of people are involved. Let's start with who you are and what was your motivation to think in such an entrepreneurial way, almost, hey, I want to start an international European platform?
Hello, everyone, and thanks for the invitation. My name is Daniel Kovac, and my project is named Forum Europeum, which is a pan-European youth-led media outlet. Basically, we founded it in 2022 with a completely different name and with a different purpose. First of all, we posted these so-called European propaganda posts to TikTok, and we gained more than 500,000 views for our first post, and it was an achievement. And then we basically posted data regarding the European Union or European countries, our structure and how we made content always changed during the years. In 2023, we started our podcasts and also our interviews with politicians. The first podcasts were about movies, and we spoke about different cultural issues or issues connected to politics through movies, which was a great concept. And we also started to interview politicians, but in Hungary and in Hungarian, although in a European context. That's why we made our first interview with the Pan-European Party Volt, with the Hungarian section, of course, and also with another politician. And in 2024, we continued making these interviews in a European context, but still in Hungarian, but we gained more views. For example, after we made an interview with the most popular figure in the opposition right now in Hungary. And in 2025, exactly on the 1st of January, we made this so-called modal change, and we became truly European with a pan-European team, and we switched to English in the field of podcasts as well, and we started to make English interviews with members of the European Parliament and other cultural figures. And we started this whole thing because of the fact that we saw that no one speaks and no one thinks in a European context, and we didn't know why it's like that, and we wanted to change it, but it will be a long process.
I think it's so interesting that you realize that at such a young age. I mean, you're 19 now, right? So
Yes.
when you basically started with posting videos online and delving into political content, you were 16. You are Hungarian. Hungary usually, when we look at international media, is very much in the news for Viktor Orban being rather EU skeptical and doing his own little interpretation of democracy, to put it in that way. So how come that you were politicized at that early age and you felt like, oh, let's just do something?
Yes. First of all, I would like to state that Hungary and the Hungarian citizens are not against the EU, and of course, the Hungarian government is not Hungary. And actually, according to many data, you can see that the only city which identifies as European is Budapest, and there's no other city like that in Europe. So even though there's anti-EU propaganda here, the people are not against the EU itself. And why I started to be in this political context in this young age. First of all, I was in politics, I mean, not as an active person, but as someone who watches videos about it when I was like 12. And I would like to speak about this thing as well, that especially when someone watches political content in this young age, it's very likely that they will be like a bit extremist. My case was not like that, but it's a very common thing. And for example, that is another purpose why we made this whole thing, to find a consensus on many fields. And yeah, basically I wanted to make content not just about politics but about culture. So my motto, I would say, or Forum European's motto, is the following thing: is that the culture should influence politics and not the other way around. So we have a bit of like this Gramscian way of thinking about culture and how it should influence politics, and we would like to do that.
I think you're very right in what you just said. Of course, first of all, about Hungary. I've myself visited Budapest a couple of years ago, and I think Budapest is a very interesting example of how the culture is very much alive and how it's dynamic. And when you're in Budapest, you feel like this is a real European city. This is a real European capital. You get those vibes in certain places in Europe, and you get that in Vienna, you get that in Berlin, you get that in Amsterdam, you get that in Warsaw. I fully agree with your assessment that there's very little discourse about what is the European culture and how do people experience the European Union, and particular among young people. From my own experience, I got very interested into the European theme when I went on Erasmus as a student and when I started traveling as a student. That was a first-hand experience. But when I'm thinking about my teenage years, European topics, in particular the European Union, is something so detached and so far out of a citizen's daily life, where I find it very difficult to translate it to other people. Now, I'm trained as a political scientist. I know that the European Union is very important and I follow what they do, but I still think it's very difficult to make things palatable and accessible to different audiences. And your target demographic is pretty young. So how do you go about this particular challenge of explaining something complex as European politics to a young demographic?
First of all, I think that we should not really think about it from the side of politics, but we should think about it from the side of culture. For example, after posting the so-called European propaganda posts, which were very, I would say, ideological, we posted simply movies from Europe. And that was a very successful series. And I think that we should build a European identity through culture, not politics. For example, one of the main things that showed me that we should do this thing to promote European culture and identity, it may sound stupid, but it was when I and my friends watched Thor: Love and Thunder, a superhero movie in which there are gods from the Scandinavian mythology, and it was a very bad movie. And when I watched it, then I started to think that why can't we Europeans tell our own stories to the people through our lenses? Why aren't we capable of that? Another good example is Ridley Scott's Napoleon, which was also a very bad movie, and it was directed by, as I told you, Ridley Scott, who is English but socialized in America. And he made a movie about Napoleon, which was completely not historical. And he said that why are historians speaking if they were not there during the Napoleonic Wars? And what was influential for me regarding this is that why are these people making movies from our stories? I think that we should tell our stories through our lenses, and then by these things we can build a European identity.
Yesterday, I just wrote on my Substack something about the Eastern German nostalgia that as well produced a lot of movies. Like, I think Goodbye Lenin is one of the movies, The Life of Others is another movie, and those European movies, they never get big budgets, they never get like super big productions, and they're known a lot less. But I always feel like they're so much closer to the actual experience of the people. And even though sometimes they are with rose-tinted glasses, very positive and nostalgic about the past, sometimes they're very critical, sometimes they're very, well, revisionist. There are so many different perspectives, but I would say that most people don't really have access to those cultural goods anymore, at least in my observation, because we don't have proper EU fundings for producing good movies anymore and making them big. There are very few exceptions, I think, lately where you had European movies really becoming popular across. And I see on your content, I mean, you have a Substack, you have a TikTok on Forum Europeanum. You as well deal with classical culture. It's not only current movies. I think it was just today that I saw a post that you uploaded about classic art, classic history, basically, that Europeans created. I would like to know, what is the type of content, when we're talking with the European lens, that fascinates your target audience the most?
Once again, I have to speak about this European propaganda post, because we did it this year as well, only in January, and those created a lot of engagement, and many people followed our other platforms as well. But I hated making them, and I don't think that these posts contain that much message, and these are bad. But that was the main thing, because I remember that was after Trump's inauguration, and that built like a protest sentiment against the whole US, but only in a political way. Yeah, that was one thing that many people liked. Besides that, on YouTube we don't really have much views. Of course, when we interview a politician, we got a lot of views, but only in a European context, because not only in a Hungarian context, because it's highly polarized, and if you see the comments, then it's hell. But in the case of MEPs, members of the European Parliament, we don't really have much views, because basically we can say that these things are not that interesting, and we also would like to change that. On TikTok, to sum it up, I would like to say that most of the posts that are very popular are those that can reach emotions and can influence them. So yeah, but TikTok is a very interesting platform. In 2025 we must use that, but we would like to move to YouTube, and we would like to put more energy to YouTube, because it's a better platform.
You mentioned the European propaganda content now several times. Explain what your intention was when you created that.
A lot of articles covered this, and they asked us. So in 2022, I posted it with agreeing with these things as well, that we should post these things. In 2025, people influenced me to post it from the group. It was great from one side, because it created a space for debate in a European context, whether we should have a federalized Europe, or how should the European Union change, which is okay, but for a media it wasn't the right tool to start these debates. And it was great to see how the people are thinking about Europe and about the European Union itself.
So what were some insights that you gained from looking at the comments, looking at the feedback that you received on that?
The most interesting comment, and one of the most common one, was the following: I love Europe, but I hate the EU, which shows us that there may be problems with the whole structure of the European Union itself. Besides that, for us it was a sign why or how the debate of whether we should have a federative Europe or a Europe of nations, I would say. It highlighted us that this could be the main debate in Europe in the following years, and also many people who might be, labeled as right wing or even far right. Also, these people can be federalists and for a united Europe, which is very interesting.
What do you mean by that? When you say like even right-wingers, they're often having a nationalist sentiment, they can be federalists. How do you see that?
It's very interesting because I think that, as I told you, many young people are interested in politics in a very young age. And I feel that most of the time they are attracted to power, not to an ideology itself and to specific views, but to power. Maybe a united Europe can be a symbol of this power for them, and they can be anti-migration. They may think that we should have like traditional families, values and these things, but at the same time, because of this power, this sentiment, they can be for a united Europe as well.
So I've been observing this sentiment of Europe has to become stronger again. Europe needs to step it up on the international stage. And this is very closely tied to military capabilities and obviously to the invasion of Ukraine. The Ukrainian refugees, obviously that's a humanitarian crisis, but it's a military crisis and a diplomatic one as well. Do you have the impression that the war was a pivotal moment, particularly for the young demographic who has grown up with a pretty peaceful, idealized vision of Europe being a safe and pacifist continent?
I don't really know. If I can only speak in my context, for us it wasn't that influential, even though in Hungary we live next to the border. So I think that we feel that we live in a dangerous situation. And besides that, I think that most of the people from my generation think that their life will be worse than our parents' life.
I'm familiar with that sentiment. When I was your age, it was similar because that was exactly the time of the European financial crisis. Southern Europe was not doing well. So yeah, I understand this sentiment. I understand all of the negative spiraling that it can create, but still you decided to almost choose a more uplifting interpretation of the current times. And I would like to ask you how you expanded your activities and Forum Europeanum to an international team. How did you find the people to engage? Because now I think you're 15 people, or how many are you?
It differs, so not many people are that active, I can tell you that. Besides that, once again with this propaganda post, because many people, due to the ideological background, joined us or started to be interested in what we do. But it was hard to emphasize that we are a media outlet, not a movement or a political party, because some people asked us whether we should run on elections and these things. I was like, nah, it's not a political movement. And we emphasize many times that we are not affiliated with any political movements or parties. We don't have a political ideology, just like a framework, which is European. After all these posts, we included that there's an option for you to join us. You just had to complete a form and then you were able to join. Of course, the whole process of people joining changed during the times because we experienced many disadvantages of being that open. But I think that we found the right way of accepting people to our community. The other thing that made people interested in what we do was when we won the European Youth Charlemagne Prize, which is a completely interesting story.
Do tell. Please do tell this story.
So we applied on the last day of the possible deadline, and then it was really interesting due to the fact that the other 26 participants participated with a project that you can see in a physical form. You can see how they cooperate in real life, and it's way easier to show that they do something when it's in a physical form, not in an online space. So because of that, it was like a very big surprise that we became the first in the first place. It was very funny due to the fact that the Charlemagne Prize doesn't only have like the youth prize, but also a prize for adults, I would say. That one in 2025, so this year, was won by Ursula von der Leyen.
Ursula von der Leyen as a current laureate. That's an interesting company you're in then. I guess that brought you as well quite a lot of publicity. So now you said you had basically first this open process, you got a lot of the media attention, and now you have an international team. Walk me through the process of creating content. Like, do you have an internal editors board, or how do you work from different countries with different perspectives on one platform? What's your concept?
It's quite interesting. It's decentralized. We try to make many different approaches, but I think that the best one is like thinking in projects. So we would like to be a hub for people in which they can find other people to help their project. And I would like to state that we mostly use Hungary as like a laboratory for projects, and then we can export those projects to other countries as well. So right now, a concrete example is that we are in the process of organizing a debate between the youth wings of political parties in Hungary about the situation of the youth, but we will also speak about many things in a European context. We would like to export that to other countries as well. For example, a participant from Romania started contacting the youth wing of the parties of Moldova because there will be an election in September, so it will be relevant, and we would like to organize that as well. But of course, not in a physical form, but in an online space because the geographical distances. Besides that, I think the core members are mostly Hungarian because we started it here, but many people are working from Italy, Romania. An interesting thing is that many people joined us from Malta, which is a small island in Europe, but we have many members from Malta. And yeah, from all across Europe. For example, the whole technology, our website, their Substack is run from Germany. So yeah, we are a pan-European team, and it's not really hard to like create content together because we think in a European context. So, for example, a recent example is the tariffs caused by the deal between Trump and von der Leyen. So it affects all of us in Europe. Therefore, it's easy to talk about it.
But are there certain topics that you would rather not speak about or avoid?
It's only my personal opinion, but I really don't like to like post in an American context, because we can see that everywhere. The only example was when we posted about the Epstein files, maybe just one post. I had no other idea, but we always try to bring something European in it, and we don't want to act as like a thing that gives you the sources immediately, because we can't compete with BBC and these big news outlets, but we would like to add this European perspective, and we would like to talk about things in details.
Yeah, I fully agree with that point of not speaking about the United States, because when you're doing a European focused project, I observe a lot that there is this tendency to contrast Europe or individual European countries with America. And it's not the point to compare America to Europe or the United States to individual European countries. I as well fully agree that Europeans must look inward, look what is happening actually on their own continent, get to know the neighbors a little better. My impression is that there's so little European news coverage these days. I don't know what about the media landscape in Hungary, but in the German media landscape, I barely find any European news unless something happened in one of the big countries, Great Britain, France, or Italy being the examples. And it is necessary to as well dig a little bit into, well, what is European, what is currently going on in different countries, and what you're doing is as well contributing to the particular debates that Europeans are having. So good luck with that, especially given that we have so many different languages and perspectives. I can imagine that it's a little bit difficult. But I wanted to ask you, from your current position, your current experience, what is your vision for the platform?
Well, as I mentioned to you, we would like to focus on debates in the future. of course, by organizing debates between youth wings. The reason behind that is that we think that maybe the youth wing, people from the youth wings of a party may not be that able to lie. Besides that, we made a lot of interviews with MEPs and we contacted many of them. And after the interviews, we asked them whether they would be open for a debate with another MEP. And yeah, that's another project to make.
What are the reactions that you're receiving from members of the European Parliament in particular? I'm just asking if they recognize the young demographic as crucial voters of the future, or if there's this tendency to maybe brush it aside and think of, oh, let's do some TikToks and that's enough.
It's funny because after the Charlemagne Prize, they take us seriously. But when we started to make this, especially when we interviewed people in real life, they did not understand what we want to do with them, because we don't see them as reporters, but just like a group of friends that want to take photos or these things. So yeah, their reaction is rather open if they answer, but most of the time they don't really answer, because I don't think that they focus on European issues, but rather on the issues of their own countries. And of course, we ask about their own countries as well. For example, we did an interview with an MEP from NEOS, from Austria, and we asked about whether Austria should join the NATO or what's going on with its independence. And we need to make this, I think, trendy to debate in a European context.
What would you say are common topics that are occurring over and over again, especially when you're working with people from different countries? You already mentioned the tariffs. Apparently, maybe not for everybody, the case of security and military capabilities. Typically, I hear a lot of migration being a topic that's occurring, but you just mentioned as well a certain concern or fear about living standards in the future among younger people, loss of living standards, loss of wealth. Are there other topics that you feel appear in all different sides?
Every time whether we interview politicians or we speak between each other, AI is always a topic. So artificial intelligence. Besides that, the US, what Trump does, it's always a topic, but we would like to distance ourselves from it. What Viktor Orban does. So especially with the Hungarian members of our team, when we are in the discussion with person from another European country, their first question is always about what's happening with the government. During the Charlemagne Prize, I tell you an interesting story. Every single participant and everyone asked me if I'll be in jail after I got home and these things, because at that time there was a bill by the government that was labeled as a Russian-style bill, and that almost became a law, but was postponed to September, and that contained things like media outlets cannot receive funds from outside the country. It could have affected us a lot, especially because we would get funds from the European Parliament. And because of that, everyone asked me whether I will be in prison or these things. I told them that no, I won't be. Hungary is not like that. But at the same time, we got interesting coverages after I got back to Hungary. The next day, I woke up and I was looking at my phone, and my face was in the Hungarian media, in the media which is closely aligned with the government, and they wrote about that so the complete pan-European team received these funds in order to support Peter Magyar's campaign, and we won it because of that. Even the Italian guys and everything is working for Peter Magyar, and they assumed or thought that we are working for him after 2 interviews in 1 year. And the 2 interviews combined with him were 5 minutes. And because of that, we are the propagandists of Peter Magyar. So, yeah.
How do you deal with such a situation? Because if I put myself in your shoes, I would get fairly nervous about that type of coverage, and you never know what people are going to make up about you. How was that?
I was not scared, but I did not like it because of the fact that it completely puts Forum Europeum into a Hungarian context. And I felt that many people who were at the Charlemagne Prize were thinking about us only in Hungarian context. They did not acknowledge the fact that we are pan-European. So yeah, in that way it could have been harmful. We did not receive that much media coverage, but we did after all. And besides that, I was not scared, but I expected more due to the fact that it could fit in the narrative that young guys receive money from the EU, and they are not that friendly towards the government, which is not true. We are neutral. We would be happy to conduct an interview with them, with people from the government, but it's not possible in Hungary to interview them, or it's really hard.
So you said that this particular bill was postponed to later this year. Are you concerned in any way? Because I'm just trying to understand a little bit what your perspective is. I myself, I'm partially Eastern European as well, and I know that in Western media in particular, Eastern Europe is always painted in a very specific narrative, especially if the government does not appear to be reliable, or if there are certain bills passed which might be undermining liberties. This is always a big topic. I see it with Poland, of course, with Hungary, you have it with Slovakia. It's just a common theme that on one hand there's this pigeonholing and this very, very narrow view of Central Eastern European and Eastern European nations. On the other hand, there often is some truth to it, that there is a certain limitation of liberties, that certain governments really try to cut off groups or journalists as well. So where do you stand on that right now, looking at the possible passing of a bill that might reduce your scope?
Yeah, especially due to the fact that we are pan-European, we can easily solve that. Basically, we can just make this whole thing a legal entity in another country, and that's all. So it's not that harmful, and besides that, it's not that serious. So in Hungary, we see that they are doing anything in order to create a narrative which is not about the daily life and how we live, but they would like to turn the narrative into these topics, which is okay, but it's not that influential, I would say. And regarding the Eastern European countries, I think that even though they might seem less free than Western European ones, I think that our generation does not feel like that, and we are not influenced by these decisions that would harm our liberty. A very good example for that is the Pride in Budapest, which was banned by the government again in order to turn the narrative. It was a record number. We also made a report on that. We interviewed politicians as well. So yeah, we don't really care about these things.
I would like to know what gives you some optimism right now. It seems that when we're talking about European culture, about the state of the European Union and everything, there's a lot of negative views or negative sentiments, fears of the future. So where do you find optimism?
I found optimism in dialogue and the fact that we are able to have a dialogue. And I completely understand that many people are criticizing the European Union and how Europe works and how we cooperate. But with discussions, we are able to change that. And my generation is the first one, especially if we take Eastern Europe into account as well, which was born in the European Union itself. And therefore, we have a completely, I would say, different way of thinking. But I think that we are not thinking about it and we are not appreciating what Europe gives to us due to the fact that we born here and we did not live during socialism, where it was very hard to go to another country, for example. So yeah.
Maybe one more question. I would just as well like to know, what do you need in order for Europeanum to grow and to reach more of its potential?
I think that right now we need to find the right platforms, the right formats, and we must have consistency. It's a key. Our goal is not to compete with, as I told you, with BBC and these very big media outlets, but we need to give another perspective, and we need to operate as a hub for debates and for people that would like to create their projects. So yeah, that's our goal, and we must build on the youth itself, because we are capable of doing this. But yeah, and we need to focus on Europe, not on the US. Back to Gramsci, we think that the contextualization of all of the things is the key, and we can achieve a stronger Europe and a more united Europe only by speaking in a European context. And another thing which is important is that we should have a platform to share all of these things. I mean, a social media outlet which we may work on in the far future, because you mentioned previously, for example, that we can barely read anything in a European context. But even if we could, for example, Reddit, X, and these platforms are not giving us these news from a European context, but every single time just in an American one mostly. So, for example, what happened in the Senate? Of course, it may be important, but not for us, really. So, yeah.
So maybe in the future we're going to discuss on European social media. I bet there are a lot of tech bros who have strong opinions on that, but famous last words. Daniel, thank you so much for the conversation.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and I really appreciate your work, because it's also a great example how we should approach Europe and the European identity.
Thank you for listening to this episode of European Glimpse. This is a passion project of mine, and it would make me very happy if you subscribed or shared this episode with a friend. Now I'm curious to find a new guest. Are you a journalist, a scholar, a student, or perhaps an avid observer of society? If you live in a European country, as well outside of the European Union, reach out to me or recommend somebody I should speak to. I would as well love to hear your feedback on this podcast, as I'm always trying to improve, and my email is europeanglimpse@gmail.com. Take care.